Now, let's talk through a strike by Nigerian university lecturers, which has crippled education at public higher level institutions for almost 6 months. The action has the support of the trades unions, with the Nigeria Labour Congress embarking on solidarity protests across the country to focus attention on the walkout by the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian Universities, or ASU. Such strikes have become common. The latest one began on the 14th of February. The previous strike in 2020 lasted for 9 months. But this time, President Buhari has given the Nigerian government 2 weeks to resolve the issues and to end the strike. But the government is still accusing both ASU and the NLC of planning to cause reprehensible anarchy. So what's the way out of this damaging, punishing quagmire? Well, in a moment, we'll hear from a member of the government's delegation that's negotiating with the striking lecturers. But let's begin our coverage by bringing human faces to the conversation. I have with me in the studio a lecturer and a student. Professor Jideofor Adibe is a lecturer at the Nasarawa State University and is one of those on strike. And Abah Owoicho is a student leader and one of the coordinators for the National Association of Nigerian Students, and he is a victim of the strike. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me come to you first, Mr. Owoicho. Thank you for joining us. Tell us what you're studying at university and how much longer you've got to graduate.
Well, I am a student of the Department of English, Benue State University, Makurdi. Ordinarily, I'm supposed to have graduated by now, except for the strike. So a course that's meant to take me 4 years is gradually spilling to 6 years.
And of course, virtually every year, there's been a strike by lecturers. I mean, that must really have disrupted your life and your plans for the future.
Of course. Because for every person, except a fool, anybody who is conscious of the movement of the earth itself is supposed to plan his life within a time frame. There's a time you fix for yourself to be in school. At another point, you are supposed to be out of school, contributing your quota to the societal development as well as developing yourself as well. But as it stands, we plan, federal government orders, if you ask me, because left for me, I never expected to be in school up to this point. I had my plans. I had what I wanted to do by this year. By 2023, I had initially thought that I should be thinking of contesting for House of Assembly in my constituency. But how do I do that? If the primary assignment for me now, which is education, I have not successfully completed it, it means that you are retarding me. And I ask, is it a crime to be a Nigerian? Elsewhere, people in my age bracket, I know where we are. They are far ahead of us, contributing their quota to their society. But here we are, struggling for the basic need, which is education, the most common, if you ask me. That every reasonable government and responsible government is supposed to make accessible and affordable for its citizenry, if we must progress as a country. We have held a generation of people down. It means those ones are going to be on ground. The next generation missed them. And so it begins to pile up. And you are complaining of youth restiveness. You don't do that when you are crippling the education. You know that will be the aftermath of your carelessness towards the educational sector.
And is it the government that you hold responsible? Or you don't hold the lecturers who are striking responsible?
Sir, let me first appreciate NLC. And I'm happy this is happening in my
That's the Nigeria Labour Congress.
Yes, because for a very long time we've not seen this tripartite synergy. This is one of the synergy that led to the Nigerian independence in the first place, Nigerian democracy and all of what we have today to brag of. Before now, NLC, the mother body of all union, is like the fountain of morale for all other unions. ASU, in turn, is responsible for recruitment of ideological leaders, young leaders. And together, ASU, NLC, the student movement, They have held this country not once, not twice, to ransom when things are going wrong. As a matter of fact, the intervention by NLC was actually long overdue before today.
Right. So you support the...
I am in full
Okay.
support.
Let me come to you, Professor Adibe. Thank you for your patience. And you were obviously listening to Mr. Owoicho there. When you listen to a student like this, how do you balance that understandable desire of lecturers to have proper pay and conditions versus what must be a concern for the welfare of students and the extreme discouragement they have? I mean, you could hear him at the outset and how this has virtually wrecked his life. Do you sympathize and empathize with them?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, let me say that I'm not speaking for ASU.
Well, you're a member of ASU.
I'm speaking for myself.
Well, you are a member of ASU.
Yeah,
let's be clear on that. Right. And you're on strike as well.
As we are on strike.
Right.
And people, even though we're a member, just like in any organization, you have tendencies with every organization. Some will suggest maybe there are other options. But what's very interesting from what the student said is that you've seen, despite the very understandable anguish, he's not placing the blame on the floor of the lecturers. And the fact that several unions within the university system and outside the university system are coming together, are showing sympathy strike. This strike is a symbolic speech of putting pressure on the government. It says one thing. Normally people should be angry with the lecturers because they are the ones that are down to. And it's between 1999 and now, we have had about 16 times this has happened. This is one of the fears, that there should be a backlash. Rather than that backlash, people are supporting them. So it is itself a narrative. And I can tell you what, for the lecturers, many lecturers are very, very angry. I can tell you there's those in federal universities, some of them have not been paid since February. And it's not just that they're struggling with how to survive and everything. They also take a lot of sympathy with the students. And I can tell you, many of them still go to mentor the students. Many of them still offer them supervision. Many of them call their students on the phone and say, give them advice. And of course, if you are employed as a lecturer, it's not just about teaching, you're also employed to research. Because in the final analysis, what brings up a university in terms of its ranking, in terms of its reputation, will be the aggregate publication of the lecturers. So they still don't want to become ex-intellectuals, that is, those who have lost this capacity to link up with abstract thinking. So they still have a way to keep busy. But it's a very, very tough time for people.
Right, but is there a chance that the longer the strike goes on, the bigger the chances of a lost generation of students like himself?
Yes.
And by the time you get back to work, some of the students would have decided to move on to other things in their lives. I mean, there's a big issue of attrition here, isn't there?
Even some lecturers are not just moving. I know a few that say they want now to move to private universities. Before, many people will say, oh, we want to stay in public institutions because there's still bigger room for research. But I know people are saying they're fed up. I mean, there are some lecturers that are in it for the love of it and for the fact that they feel they are playing roles, they are impacting on some students. And you pass on the street, you find your ex-student, somebody you can't even recognize, they stop you and tell you stories. So there are people who, within the profession, who are extremely, extremely disappointed. Do you know what is happening? There is a link between this prolonged strike and what is happening with those Kaduna train robbery victims, kidnap victims. It's one thing, government insensitivity. So the protest you see around is not whether ASU was right.
It's a much bigger thing.
Yes, whether ASU could have explored other options. It's been an internal debate within members. This strike, we are tired. Is there any other option we can also explore? So people coming out together now in sympathy. It's not they say, lecturer, you're right. But it's a metaphor for other protests.
Okay, let me bring you in, Abah Owoicho, and assessing the impact of all this. I mean, this has become a multi-generational problem, hasn't it? Because, I mean, there were strikes when some of the lecturers themselves, from what I've read, were in school, and now there are strikes when their children are in school. So is there an approach as a student yourself? Do you guys talk about this? Is there an approach that might be different other than strikes? Because those strikes clearly aren't working if they're multi-generational, are they?
Well, thank you. Let me pick from where you said those strikes aren't working.
I mean, if it's taken place over generations and you're arguing about the same thing, then clearly it isn't working, is it?
Well, for me, as a unionist, since I cannot go and use the barriers of gun to drive home my demands, the best way I can drive home my demand that is within the ambit of the law, I will go for it. Let me appreciate Prof. He spoke like a father. Be that as it may, the strike, whether it is effective or ineffective, it is not on the side of the lecturers, in my opinion. Successive governments are. When the lecturers embark on strike, you negotiate with them, you play lip services to your promises, you come up with documents and agreement. For instance, the 2009 agreement, in quote, that is one of the reasons for the current strike action. Right. As at that time, the federal government made promises that up till now, according to ASU and from what is obtainable in the public sphere, the federal government has not been able to meet up with these promises. For me, this incident strike, it's not because the lecturers want to always be on strike. Right. It is because of the insincerity on the part of successive government. If we are a country that takes education as a priority, you will learn from the mistake of the previous government. What did they do? How far-reaching was it? If it was effective, toe that part. If it wasn't, then change. But for the lecturers, the only way they can drive home their demands is to down tool. We have a government that not until you push them, they won't respond to you, even as student. The reason why the government today is running helter-skelter to make sure there are some window dressing and temporary measure to curb the strike is because people are on the streets.
Yeah, but what if the government can't afford the things that you're asking for? I've heard some analysts saying that part of the problem is that lecturers who are supposed to be intellectuals in society, creative in their thinking, are not coming up with different solutions. There are very few countries in the world where government just pays every single thing. I mean, there are different ways of raising money. There are different ways. Perhaps your negotiation, and I'll put this to you, perhaps the negotiation should move in a different direction where you can, explore other options other than just the government giving you a stipend.
I don't think it's, I agree with you that the entire problem of university education is not all about money. There are also some problems that are endemic to us. Having said that, I just want to give you an example. When you say they don't bring up ideas.
Well, I'm asking you if they bring
for example,
up ideas.
we discussed, when, for example, amongst ourselves, we say, why don't we explore this option of arbitration panel, industrial courts? Do you know the response of some people is that the government is like going into a football match with a referee, and the referee has the ways to
but I'm not talking about it.
No, because it's an option.
I'm talking about other means of raising money.
No, okay, raising money there, that's as always been there.
Universities do research. They go into deals with private institutions
it's not
and
just
so on.
about money, because that's a
yeah, but you need money to fund education and improve standards.
That's not just the issue the ASU is raising. And because the issue they are raising, for example, 1.5 trillion agreed in 2009 to be paid in 3 tranches.
So it's about deals that have already been agreed.
The other things in it, for example, if you say you can't afford it, is acceptable, but it's the manner of the negotiation. For example, the student body, they were talking to the Minister for Education at Damon, a very brilliant writer. I respect him. We both were writing for Daily Trust. He was a columnist writing on Tuesdays. I was writing on Thursdays. But he walked out on them. And that's not to say it's like the same big man attitude of people in authority looking down on the lecturer. After all, you're not a governor. Why will I listen to you? What will it have taken President Buhari to call the leadership to a table together with the Minister of Labor? Look at even the way the Minister of Labor was talking to them.
So there's a certain insensitivity.
And disdain and contempt. Contemptuous of your position. Well, who the hell are you? Something like that. And that's not really, if you come around. That's not conducive for negotiations. If really you come around, everybody understands the times are hard. And people can see good intention, people can see effort. At the heart of it is trust. People can see. In fact, he was using the word, we drop to this thing and manage this one. What was agreed was just a promise. You know, talking to people like they are boys. The same thing that patronizing. The same thing that is happening with the kidnapped victims of the Kaduna. They've been there because none of their children is involved. Nobody wants to do anything. And look at, for example, while these students have been at home for this prolonged period, you have the speaker Bajabiamila splashing pictures. He's gone back to Harvard, and then you have Adamu's child graduating.
Rubbing it in your face.
Yeah, rubbing it in face. That is insensitivity, and that's actually part of the reasons why you're having this solidarity.
Well, I hope people are understanding more the situation now, and I want to thank both of you very much indeed for coming in. Professor Jideofor Adibe is a lecturer at the Nasarawa State University and is one of those on strike, and Abah Owoicho is a student leader and one of the coordinators for the National Association of Nigerian Students, and he casts himself as a victim of the strike. Thank you very much indeed.